one where I just kind of forgot, and my guest was like, "So is this officially starting?" And I was like, "Oh shit, I forgot to record." Hit record.
Yeah, that happens.
I hit record. I was also looking for my other glasses this morning, and Avi, I was like, "Oh, I can't find my glasses." And Avi looked at me. She was like, "You're wearing them." I was like, "Oh no, I have a second pair." Like,
Oh, right. No, because I've done that too.
she must have thought, she was just like looking at me like, "What's wrong with you? Can you not like feel them on your face?" Anyway, oh, I'm so glad that we have made this work. Like,
Mhm.
and
I feel like a
I'll
little
be,
nervous.
oh, I mean,
I
I
mean,
guess
just a
like
little.
yeah, it's like a big, oh, it's 108. I just looked at my
Oh my God, that's right. 108 here.
oh no,
Building
wait.
those points.
Um,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I get, yeah, I think it's stuff that we've talked about so much. And when you and I just talk personally, we're
yeah.
obviously completely unedited, and
Mm.
we can say whatever we want, even if we later go like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that, right? Like I didn't know
Yeah.
enough, and there's nothing lost because we're just speaking to each other. But I think like this, even even outside of what's currently happening today, this topic has been very scary to try to take on, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but just remember, like, this all gets whatever, anything we say can be easily edited out,
Yeah.
and um it doesn't have to sound perfect at all, because it's going to get looked at, and then I will also send it to you before it goes live anywhere, so you can,
Okay.
everything's hosted on Spotify for podcasters, and I could just give you my link, my login for that,
Yeah.
and you can listen through and make sure that like you feel good
Okay.
about everything. I feel like
Yeah.
my mic needs to be higher up.
Okay.
um Hold on, let me get something. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I'm also probably going to start like, I'm in this little, so I'm at Dumbo Works, Soho Works.
Oh,
It's the co-working
cool.
space. It's cute,
Uh-huh.
right? And there are
Uh-huh.
these little like phone conference room thingies, but this one is so hot. It's like the central heating is on in the
Oh
building,
God.
and because it's like a little greenhouse, because there's like,
Like
it's
roasting in
windows
there.
on that side. Yeah,
Oh,
so
how
I'm gonna,
cute.
yeah, it's like a lovely space, but anyway, I'm probably gonna start like it's so wedding.
All
Anyway.
good.
Oh, and I'm good to go till 3 o'clock if we need to.
Yeah, I
Are you
can do
good?
that.
Are you good for
Yeah.
that? Okay. So I'm just gonna, my babysitter and I are just gonna drive together to school to pick up. So,
Oh.
all right. Well, I would love to officially welcome you to Voices on the Side, Ruby. I'm gonna do a separate
Thank you.
introduction after the fact. I've learned that, I don't know. I feel it's just nicer to record it separately. I guess
Yeah.
that's what I think, start to feel a little bit like if I go and like list all the reasons why you're wonderful and everything you've done, it's a bit like,
Awkward.
okay. Yeah. But yes, welcome to Voices on the Side. And I guess today's episode is a little bit different than the other ones I've done, because we are really focused on shedding light, intentional use of the word light,
Mhm.
on a few things. And gosh, it's hard to know even where to start, isn't it? Like, where
Yeah.
do we start? I'll just say, like, of course, you and I have known each other for decades, which is like crazy to to think about. Um, but we've sort of crisscrossed in and out of each other's lives all over those years. And I was a yoga teacher for 15 years, and you have over the last few years been in the, I guess, broadly speaking, we say the wellness space.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your work that you've been focused on over these last few years.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, first of all. So yeah, I guess a couple of years ago at the end of 2021, I officially launched my business. I guess I'm always a little more comfortable with like saying I'm in the spiritual business, but I work with the Akashic Records. Do you want me to quickly define what that is? Because I'm sure most people are like, what the heck is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
So I sort of describe it as, an energetic or metaphysical library, if you will, of every thought, every event, every emotion that has ever occurred is supposedly stored in this realm. So I think of it as sort of like a realm or a frequency where just information lives. And I tend to think of it as any time, because we all are receiving information and messages from our intuition all the time. I think anytime that happens, we're all tapping into that realm, the Akashic Records. So I work with that and I incorporate tarot into it. I also do some energy healing with it, lead meditations. Yeah. And I had been on my own like deep healing journey for about 6 to 7 years before that, and just never thought I had the quote ability to do this until it started coming through in 2020, which was a big consciousness shift, I think, for a lot of
Mm.
people. And yeah, I launched this business really unexpectedly, but it's been the most rewarding thing and clearly where I'm meant to be.
In some respects, I feel like you've almost been unwillingly dragged into it despite any sort of inner resistance, right? Like you want to do it, but then you had inner critics come up, and then you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, but then you keep getting pulled in. And similar
Yeah.
to this conversation finally happening in
Mm,
this more like open way. Like we've obviously been talking a lot, but there's this like pull to your truth, whether that is in the way you spend your like professional energy. And it's hard, right? Like we talk about all the time, like running your own business, being a creative, no matter your industry, is really difficult. But I think when it comes to something that is so outside of typical capitalism, like what you do, where you can't like quantify, you know, and yet you need to operate in the realm of capitalism, it's very tricky. And then having any sort of conversation that is outside of the mainstream majority kind of comfort zone, which is why I created this podcast, was, to take the voices on the side that are typically marginalized and like center them. But I feel like we've gotten to a point where you can no longer ignore signs to like be your true self, right? To work in what you want to work in and to speak about what you want to speak about. And it's actually really beautiful because that is precisely the work you're doing, right? Like that's like what you tell clients is like ultimately like hear your own wisdom and your own intuition, right?
yeah, yeah,
um
that's true. Your truth, your
yes,
truth.
yes, your truth. So the reason I brought up the fact that I was a yoga teacher for most of my adult life is I remember um it was in 2020 or maybe 2021. And I remember seeing your Instagram video post about spiritual bypassing.
Yes,
And I
that one.
remember because AV was still only a few months old, and you remember we were living in the hotel?
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember it was
Oh,
like we just had to be, anytime she was napping, like I had to just sit in the dark room, and like it was all just one open room.
gosh.
And it was that I was like, she was napping, it was the middle of the day, it was dark. And I remember seeing your spiritual bypassing video. And I think that's like when like that was like the most recent reconnection, which thankfully we haven't disconnected from that one. But over the years, we've
Yeah.
kind of like hopped in, hopped out. And this one like was really I think just cemented that like we're not going to disconnect anymore. But that was the first time I feel like anybody that was in the quote wellness world or spiritual space, whatever language we want to do to describe, I don't know, I didn't hear anybody before this, but I saw Kim Saira referred to this industry as wellness girlies.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I actually hadn't heard that either, right
Yeah.
before she
Yeah.
used it, apparently, but it's a thing, I guess.
Yeah, and like, but I don't know if I can't remember if we talked about it, but there was comments about like, well, that's like you're talking down to the women
Uh,
healers, and she's like, no, dude, it's like slang, you know, it's like
it's a thing.
it's a thing. It's not like I'm not calling you like a girl
Right.
child or whatever, but this world, and I was so thrilled to see you calling out spiritual bypassing within this community,
Yeah.
because I felt like I felt really fed up, and it was just the year prior, 2019, that I taught my last public yoga class, and I was just like, I can't be in this world anymore, but I didn't really know why. I couldn't really articulate why. um the thing that made the most sense was my mental health after having my first kid, and feeling like I had changed so much, and I was like doing so much personal work, and it felt like there was a disconnect between what I would show up and teach as a yoga teacher and the stuff I would say, and like what my soul felt like, it needed to express. And years on, looking back and then seeing what you were talking about in your video, was like, oh my God, yeah, this is the stuff. Like, I don't want to be in an industry that perpetuates, you know, a, a lot of BS, basically, where particularly people of color um, don't really have a space to be in truly,
Mhm.
and like the whole thing of, wait, these practices come more from like where we come from,
Yes.
you know?
Thank you. Uh-huh.
And yeah, and like there was this like, I just knew it, just like the fact that you had the courage to come out and like say that a few years ago and talk about it. Um I was just like, oh my God. And yeah, I mean, even your business is founded, the shift is founded on the principle of, I mean, you should describe it. Your mission
Yeah,
statement.
well, I know. So yes, so I guess technically my full mission statement, which developed last year, is was it last year actually? Yes, it was. Is to help close the wellness gap for the BIPOC community by joyfully reclaiming our magic and our sacred healing practices. Like you said, so many that came from our cultures. I mean, I have memories, obviously, many of us do, of our grandparents, great grandparents, our ancestors, like practicing, a lot of these things just organically, genuinely in their everyday life. It wasn't this trendy thing that was just cool, It wasn't for looks, it wasn't performative in any way. So yeah, and I'll say just like, based on like, I'm just thinking back now based on what you said, like yes, I shared that video. That must have been in 2020, I think it
I think
was.
it
So this was,
was. Yeah, yeah. It was,
yeah.
yeah. Because,
And
yeah.
so that was even before I was fully like, I didn't have my business yet. I
Hmm.
hadn't even
No, I
launched.
know. It was like you had just, I remember
Yeah.
you were just thinking like of taking your reading work out as like offering it. Remember? Because I was like, I'll be your
Yes.
guinea pig. I kept being like, I want to be your guinea pig.
Yeah.
Remember? And like
Yeah. So that,
you
yeah.
hadn't started offering those services yet. And I loved everything you were saying. I obviously love you as a person. But I was always like so jaded about the industry. Do you
Yeah.
remember? Like we talked about that a lot, and I was like, it's all crap, and like, cause I'm coming from this place of like having been, I mean, it feels like too big of a word, but I think it is accurate. Like having been oppressed as a person of color, always just fighting to have a place. And I know it sounds especially weird because I did have such a visible role with like a really big company, but like I that was also part of it. Like there was something in my soul that was like, you're just a diversity checkbox,
Yeah. It's
you know?
still having to play by their rules. That's
Yeah,
the
it was just like, it was just like, oh, I I served a purpose for a lot of the circles I was in, where I provided some degree of authenticity to an Eastern, like I was some connection to like the East. And
Yeah.
like, but I never knew that because I was like, well, I'm just American, like being Asian American or any sort of bicultural identity, we sort of feel like in both, but neither, right? Like we don't feel fully American because we know we don't look like the average American, but then we don't really feel fully like Korean or Chinese or whatever it may be. Because when we go back to our like homelands, they like immediately know we're not
Yeah.
like we're American. So I remember just I felt like such a juxtaposition between your like kind of like bright, like eagerness to be a part of this industry. And I always wanted to support that. But I was also felt like the old jaded, like, like I
Yeah.
don't know, just like, I'm kind of like, man, I hope you'll
Over it.
find some good people in here, but like, there's so much BS. And I think so you shared a podcast with me, and we're just not gonna name any specific names through our conversation, just to protect people's identities and whatever. And we're just really wanting to talk about our experience, not like calling particular people out. But I remember you shared a podcast with me of this person who was pretty instrumental in your Akashic journey and what you learned and everything.
Yeah.
And you're really excited about this person. And you're just like, yeah, her podcast like really got me through the pandemic. And you had so much respect for her. And I remember like following her and like trying to get on board, but feeling a little bit like I don't really like the way she talks. She sounds like she sort of has this like, I don't know if her voice is put on, like it didn't sound, I don't know. But then I was always like, well, I'm coming from this jaded place where like and I couldn't even really articulate what I was so mad about with the
Yeah.
wellness world. Like when I had such a good career in it, like, what am I mad about?
I should just be
And
grateful.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
kind of a
Yeah.
trap.
Gaslighting myself with all our new age spiritualisms, right?
Yeah. That's, yeah.
And over the years, I think we talked a lot about this person because you did have an immense amount of respect for her. Um, and then something happened.
Yeah. 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 I'm just like, this is so interesting because it's taking me down like the journey of just like the memory lane of like my journey just over the last few years and how it's been unfolding, which is interesting. But yes, I really looked up to her as a mentor, even though I never worked directly with her, but I purchased like online courses. And so for me, it was like, she wasn't necessarily my first introduction to the Akashic records, but was my first like deeper dive into it. Like I had heard of it before, but like really getting to know about the Akashic records, I followed her journey, like with her discovering it and learning it. And so she had an online course to like learn how to read the records. And so I purchased that and I didn't, I took it with a grain of salt, but I don't even remember at the time. Yeah, I think I did watch it already. And so, she was just a big part of my journey and part of my introduction into all this. And so I'm forever grateful for that. I know that she played a big role. And then do you just want me to pretty much dive into the
I, th-
experience,
I
what happened?
mean, I think so because
Yeah.
that I feel like was one of the biggest moments where the facade of
Yeah.
what this industry ideally at its best could be, which I think you represented at that moment, and I was like the other end of it. I feel like that's when the facade started to crack a bit, maybe for you, and you're just like, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. And there were I'm sure we'll get into it too. There were instances even before that, there were little red flags along the
mm.
way. And before I dive
but
into it,
you but you blame yourself when there's a little red flags, right? Like when
yeah,
it's some
so
these little things, you're like, oh wait, no, it must be I must be,
right.
it's me. I must be seeing
Me,
things
right.
wrong.
Maybe I'm being too sensitive to this thing or something, it's with that could be a whole rabbit hole in itself. But like, but I mean, before I dive into that, I did kind of want to speak to what you brought up earlier, which is this interesting intersection of especially being an American, like a person of color raised here, right? An Asian American. I think it's extra confusing to parse these things out. And so I feel like this has been a big part of my journey of like, my ancestors started getting very loud last year, and I understand why now, of like calling me back to my roots, literally like outright saying to me, like, do not whitewash yourself anymore. Stop whitewashing you and your practice and your work. And but the crazy thing is, I think as an Asian American, like that's how like kind of blind to it we can be, or it's so hard. Like I didn't even know it's so subconscious, the sort of assimilation that we had to do to survive here, and the fact that we don't feel like we fully belong anywhere. It's just such an ingrained thing of like assimilate, assimilate, assimilate. And I talked about this too before, but like having it be a big realization that I had to like, I've always just aligned with whiteness, and that's a very specific to Asians thing, right? That's all we've done. It's all I've seen my parents do to survive, is align yourself with whiteness, whatever it takes, whatever it is, just you align yourself with whiteness. So I didn't know that I was doing this. And I realized only now in this journey that I did it even in my past business. Like I owned a travel business. That was the first one I started. And I didn't realize that, I was naturally drawn to very ethnic cultural things, even aesthetically, because it was like a travel and style and design business. And then slowly, 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 it would just get like diluted, 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 and start looking exactly like everything else out there. And just like everything was beige and everything was, and to me, it was subconscious because I was like, well, this is just what I see has succeeded. This is what I've seen works. And so there's that subconscious thing of like, well, I don't know. I don't see any of this out there. So it must not work, or it must not be accepted. So anyhow, I just wanted to speak to that, of like how just sort of subconscious this stuff is, and it's hard to become aware of.
And what I'm hearing is like there's this internal tug of war between the assimilation sort of like demands that are put on us as families of color, families of Asian heritage in America. That's just like part of your psyche from day one. And it's supported by your parents, it's supported by communities around that we're in. But then on the other side, the voices that started getting louder within were like, you always refer to them lovingly as your ancestors, right? Like, which I just wanted to clarify for listeners. Like some people might just consider that like the voice of spirit, or the cosmos, or the universe, or God, or intuition. It's, we all kind of we'll use your language of ancestors, but it's the same, right? Like it's that like deep connection from within and from where you come from. I feel like there was like an internal tug of war between that. So like I think when you start, and I remember that was another touch point for us, is when I saw that you had your business and I bought some items. Oh no, I like bought items, but I also did a raffle and won the
Giveaway.
raffle.
That's
Yeah,
right.
the
You won my
giveaway.
giveaway.
And I was like, oh my God, I never won anything. So, but I remember you had the most beautiful, very ethnic, like, I hate that word ethnic. What the heck does that mean? But like, yeah, non-American cultural, beautiful products ranging from like kitchenware to jewelry to maybe some sort of, I don't know if you have clothes, makes shawls or something, I seem to remember. So I remember that. And that I feel like is from like your soul, from guidance from your ancestors and where you want to go. And then like your more like lived human mind, which I sometimes call like pea brain. I say like our pea brain versus big mind, which is language I learned from one of my yoga teachers, Eric Schiffman. But it's like your pea brain kind of pulls you out. It's like, oh, no, wait, you got to do the things that everyone else is doing. And yeah, to your point, gets all diluted. And it's been this like constant process. Like that just keeps happening. And it's sort of like, when things repeat, it's when like lessons need to be learned, right? So the same thing keeps happening, and it's like your ancestors knocking you on the head with like, dude, wake up. What are you?
I know they're like, stop it. But it's crazy because that, my point is you can't even see it yourself most of the time. It takes a while. And yeah, and sorry, there's one more thing I want to speak to before I forget. It's just so loud. And so before, and then I will definitely want to dive into this, but it just kept coming up as you were talking, and it's been a message that's been coming through recently of like, it makes me angry kind of, because, you're talking about the wellness world, the spiritual space that you were in, and then slowly, for good reasons that we know, like you start to feel jaded, start to hate it, can't even put your finger on why. And I just feel like it makes me angry because I feel like it's all these beautiful things that like start out, it's like, again, it's like the best case scenario of what it could be, right? The intention of these things are so beautiful and it could be so great and it is so great, and then they get sort of ruined for us, for lack of a better term, due to like colonization and white supremacy and all of this stuff. And I feel like it gets taken from us. And that's the whole point. That is what colonization is, right? It's extracting and taking from us. But it makes me so angry because it just ruins these things for us. Like you felt like you had to leave that space. And it was a thing that you so genuinely loved with your heart and soul, is so, so into it. And yet you are the one who felt like you had to leave this space because of everyone else faking it and corrupting it and bastardizing what it actually is. And I obviously feel this way about, me entering fresh and new into this spiritual space, something that calls to my soul so deeply. Yeah, I know I got really emotional. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
We're crying, but
Um,
yeah.
because this is just how deep it hits, right? It's like, it really, when you think about it, you're like, fuck, it's just another thing that's getting taken. And like, it also became clear to me, I think he'd be okay with me sharing this, but like my husband, I noticed, has a thing with like nature sometimes and like beautiful spaces. Like, for instance, places like Topanga, like we're just going to go there in this episode, right? We're just going to say it all. Places like Topanga, Malibu, Venice, like places that are inarguably beautiful in the world. And it's just like one by one, those all get taken. I mean, this is again the common theme, right? Indigenous peoples or whoever were like, on the land first, and then it's one by one, slowly, it just gets taken. And it's just like all of these, feels like so many of the world's most beautiful places, most rich places get taken. And it's like, I feel like it's ruined that connection for him with nature. Like a lot of these most beautiful places, because the culture of it, he can't stand it. And I can't help but see the parallel
Mm.
between that and like what you were feeling, right, in the wellness space and all that. And it's like, it really does steal it from us,
Mm.
like, completely. And I had this message come through when I was in Topanga, and I've of course loved the land. Like who would go there and not say that it's fucking beautiful, right? And love it. And I had this message come through of like, don't let white
Mm.
people take this from you too. Like when you do that, when you just turn your back on it, or like, I hate it because it's turned into this now, like this culture that I don't subscribe to. But it's like, then you're letting them take the whole,
Yeah.
the beauty of it too, or your connection to. And it makes me really sad. Like that breaks my heart because I think that's what we see happening over and over. And it's
Mm.
become very apparent to me that in those ways, it's like, yeah, those are just all the ways that it is taken and stolen from us. And so I think that is why when I'm entering this space now, and I know this is my life's work, that's why my ancestors, or whatever you want to call it, I feel them very strongly as my ancestors, but they're so loud about it. They're like, do not, this time you cannot do that. Like you just cannot let anyone take this from you. It's too
Yeah.
sacred. And all of these things are sacred. And they're our
Yeah.
birthright. All of these things are our birthright too, you know?
I think it's that it's a really pivotal time in that way, right? Because many of these conversations are happening across different cultures and in different scenarios politically, like
Yeah.
and just like within local communities. And so the consciousness has been raised to take this on at this point, because it takes a lot of courage to not be stolen from. My babysitter actually tells a story about when she got pickpocketed. Somebody like pickpocketed her phone. She
Mhm.
felt it. It was like she was getting off the subway in New York and she felt it. She didn't have her phone. And then she went after the guy.
Wow.
And
Yeah, which
she
is
was like,
brave.
she was wearing like platform heels and but she's like a no nonsense, like I'm not like,
Yeah.
but she's still, I think, being a female in
Mhm.
this day and age is still like, I think I would be scared,
Yeah, it's
like,
always
but
risky.
she went after her because she's like, I don't care. That was a new phone. I want my phone. And she went
Yeah.
after the guy and he was holding her phone and she like grabbed it from him and she was like, that's mine.
Oh,
And
wow.
and then one thing about New York City is it's so crowded, right? There's lots of
Yeah.
people. And I'm like, oh my God, like, were you scared? And she's like, I just wasn't thinking. I was so mad. And
Yeah.
it was my phone. But like it took so much courage to not allow her phone to be stolen. Right. So I
Yeah.
just tell that story as like a simple sort of like illustration of what we're talking about here, which is much more complex and deep, but like it's not an easy thing, but it is necessary. Otherwise, we're going to lose all of it. It's just going to
But
keep going. And we're going to lose
yeah.
all of it to white supremacy, to at worst, white supremacy, at best, like a diluted, whitewashed version.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, the ancestors and thank God there is much more of a focus on trying to fight for this, right?
Yeah, because again, yeah, it makes me so angry because it's like, why should we have to be the ones to walk away from it?
When I
Why
think like
would we walk
Asians
away?
also are in a really privileged position to say this because like we are of all people of color, of all races in America, we're the ones that white people have deemed to be safe, right? We're the
Right.
ones that
Not a
white,
threat.
I mean, I shouldn't say white people. That makes it sound like individuals. Like, let's say the system has said that we're not a threat. We're the model minority, quote unquote. So we have a lot of power to
Mm,
support
yeah.
like support people of color, including our own people,
Yeah.
or perpetuate racism, right?
I'm glad
Because like,
you made that point. Yeah.
yeah.
'Cause it's true. I think that is really true. Yeah. Um, yes. So if you want me to dive into the experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is so the reason I think I referred to it as like this was like a turning point where it was so egregious that you were no longer like immediately putting it on yourself. Like, when something happens and you see red flags and you're like, well, that's weird, but I'm probably being too sensitive. Like that's one thing.
Yeah,
But this, although I think even at the beginning you were questioning yourself
I did.
still, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us,
Yeah.
you had an interview because you were interested in potentially joining this person's team.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were looking for readers to join the team. They had obviously a big following. So it's like, again, my logical business brain, all those things. I was like, well, of course that would be great for business. And then, whatever, I'd get paid more and have grow my audience and all this stuff. But they're just from the beginning, there were always things that were misaligned that did not feel in alignment for me. One, it's like if I did, there were just a lot of parameters. I would lose a lot of freedom. And let's be honest, when I say that, that also means I'm losing a lot of my own voice, right? Like my own prerogative to do things the way I wanted to. And so it's like it would be at a set price, and it was much higher than what I was charging before. So that was already the first thing that didn't feel aligned to me because I was purposely offering shorter readings so that there was a range for more accessibility, right? Because accessibility is a value of mine. And clearly, I don't think that was one of hers because she wasn't really thinking about that, right? So there were just all these things where I was like, well, what if, like, I don't know if that's a line, but I decided to do it anyway. I was like, let me just like apply and just see what happens. And I did get chosen to just like actually kind of go to the next step, which was, to give her a reading, which makes sense. She has to experience your work. And I just had this feeling in like the pit of my stomach and my gut this whole time leading up to that just did not feel, I don't know. I was so nervous. Obviously, she was somebody I really respected and looked up to. I felt like, looked at her as a mentor. So of course I wanted to impress her. Of course, it felt like this test from the start of like, I got to do really well. And then we we did it. And I actually felt like it was going fine and like pretty well. And then I said one thing, and it was something personal. It was like about, maybe a romantic relationship, which I know can be a very touchy thing, like a loaded topic for a lot of people. And it wasn't, in my eyes, what I shared, it wasn't even anything like good or bad. It was very neutral, but it was a very specific observation or something about the dynamic of their relationship. And because she instantly, I felt like my eyes were closed, because they often are when I'm in the records. And I opened for a minute, probably because I could feel, I knew that like, I'm not sure if this is going to be taken well, or how the reaction is going to be. And I could see the look on her face and in her eyes, which is like, I was like, oh, she's not taking this well, right? For some reason, it's not being received well. And I felt the energy instantly shift. And it was like, because she basically was like, oh, that's really weird, because that's completely opposite of, all the guidance, all the messages that I've been getting about us. And even what some other readers have told me, like, this is the total opposite. And I mean, I'm like, okay, like I can only tell you what I'm picking up. That's my job. And I just knew from there, I could tell her energy shifted, and she already, I think, didn't trust anything else that would come out of my mouth at that point. And then her energy changed, and she was like, never mind. Like, I don't have any more questions. Just, just whatever comes through, whatever guidance. And I should have spoken up for myself at the time, but like everyone channels in a different way or works differently. And that's the way she does it. Like, she'll just open the records and like tons of information comes through. I usually need something to react to, or I work best and receive the most information when people either ask questions, or like, that's why I work really well with tarot. Just like, I need like some stimulus or something to react to. But I didn't tell her that. I was already nervous, and I already felt things shift. I was like, okay. And so I kind of continued on and just shared like whatever else came through, but obviously it already felt like weird, And we finished, and just like the audacity, I think the audacity now, when I think back on this, but I finished, and she was like, okay, well, she's like, yeah, I think with this experience, what this reading showed me is just like some of the ways in which you're just like a little bit off. Like, it's like close, there were a few things where it was like it felt close but not quite, which, by the way, this is just not even how you work with the records. It's not about a test to see how like right or wrong or accurate or whatever. It just doesn't work like that. And she had shown me when I finished that she apparently had pulled out her pendulum and was using it the whole time without me knowing. And all of this just feels so icky. So, for those who don't know, a pendulum is like another tool that a lot of people use in the spiritual industry. And it's like, you literally hold this pendulum, and it can be almost like a yes no type of thing. So you just hold it and almost ask like yes or no questions. And depending on the way that it spins or hangs or whatever, like moves, that it gives you your answer, right? So she had pulled that out and was like using it the whole time to like, I guess, test and see if what I was saying was accurate. And she's like, yeah, you said this, but it felt a little off, because what you said about like my grandfather, it didn't really feel like that grandfather. It felt like my other grandfather, or it felt like my grandmother or something. I don't even remember. She gave me all these reasons why I was apparently wrong. Um, and yeah, and then it ended like that. She's like, but so thank you. And I mean, obviously I didn't get the job. And to me, it felt like the biggest crash and burn type of experience or interview I've ever had. And it was one that, I cared so much about. I obviously wanted her to think highly of me, or and I was shattered at first, actually. I know, like, I did take it personally at first. Like, who wouldn't? Because it was tied up to in all my personal wounds of like failure and rejection, and someone I saw as like really credible and frankly above myself at the time, telling me that I was wrong, or I sucked at this thing,
And and
Um,
and I think the thing that your husband and I know we both pretty much had the same response when you shared
certainly.
with us what happened. We're just like, I mean, this isn't like you weren't interviewing to be like a math teacher where there are correct answers to the math equation that they could present to you, and they'd be like, I'm sorry, you got that incorrect. You don't know what
Yeah.
you're doing
Very
because
black or
you,
white.
yeah, like it wasn't, it was just like, I remember just being like, who the heck does she think she is to, you know, say to you that you're not doing the thing correctly? And then my immediate next thought was, she's talking to you this way because she's a white person talking to a person of color. So
Yeah.
like that to me was just oh yeah, that's okay. That to me I don't even know why how it does that. Just does it automatically. And it's fine. The autopilot thingy,
Yeah.
yeah. Um that to me, I was just like, it just felt so clear that she felt she could talk to you that way because you're an Asian person, or like a person of color. And I was so mad. And I like, and because I'm on the outside, and obviously I'm biased because I'm your friend. And but still, I'm like, there's no other that was definitely a part of it. And then
Yeah.
another little layer to the story was I relayed this to a friend who's now become a mutual friend of yours and mine, right? And at the time, though, I don't think you had met yet. And I was just, she and I have been, oh no, this actually instigated our conversation, her and my conversations about racism, I think.
This was an important experience for all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's huge, which is why I'm like, I know it's like kind of, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't want to like offend anyone, or it's not
Mhm.
about like just bad mouthing people, but it's such an important thing that happened. But I relate it to her. Oh, because she had also, this friend had also listened to the
Mhm.
podcast, because I did like some of, I was like, oh, she's interesting. And Ruby really likes her. And my friend is also very, quote, woo woo. And,
Mhm.
like interested in the Akashic records, and she reads astrology. And so I thought like, hey, she would like it. But her immediate reaction was like, that she felt that that person was inauthentic. And this is
Yeah.
before your interview. And she was just, and she's white presenting, although she's not fully white. And so she's always had like no shame, no fear in calling BS out when it comes to white people, because she just doesn't have that layer of like racial fear or
Yeah.
oppression. And she grew up in, like, her parents are both meditators, and she grew up in this community, right? So I feel like she calls out the BS really easily. And she didn't like this person from day one. So when this happened to you, and I was like so mad, and I shared this story with her, she was like, oh yeah, that sucks, but like, what makes you think Ruby's race has anything to do with it?
Yeah.
And I was like, like, like,
You're like, it has everything to do with it. Um, yeah, and I'll share when I share it. So I shared with my husband, same exact reaction you both had, right? And it was so
and
interesting to me.
we should say I don't know if we mentioned your husband's Black.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. He's African American, and like, yes. So that's it's this again shows how subconscious this stuff is. Like, I wasn't aware, and it took outside people. Your both of your instant reactions. I mean, his words were probably literally like that. That sounds like some white girl shit. Like, and he instantly calls that
Yeah.
stuff out. Like, so many times now when I say stuff, and it's like now I see it because you start to gain more awareness around it. But I'm like, oh God, it is like so much of this stuff is because it's the entitlement. It's the, it's the, of course I know better than you. Of course I'm the authority on this. And there's also that layer of like, how dare you challenge me? Which I have felt, and we'll talk about this so much, it's come up for me over and over and over again. And the common thread in this is it's coming from white women. It's the same like feeling, right, that I receive of like, how dare you challenge me? How dare you say no to me? How could I be wrong? Of course I know best. So yeah, I think
And we've played really well into that, because
yeah,
we've been very well trained by our immigrant parents who needed to
yeah,
assimilate to survive,
mhm,
who were looking out for us when they were saying like, hey, align with whiteness.
yeah,
We've been really well trained by our, inner circles, as well as culture, right? That's been kept us in our box. Like, hey, we'll let you be
yeah,
pretty close to us, not like the other races in this country,
yeah,
but like you need to not challenge us. You need to,
Yeah.
like
It's just like
stay
do
in your
whatever to get,
lane.
yes, do whatever to get their approval was the thing. It's like you just, you get their approval, like then you're good, then you're safe. Um, so yeah, I think that, and just to share this, the whole time last year, this lesson kept coming up for me over and over and over again. I can't even tell you how many times, but the lesson was like, and this is a message I received in my records, but um they even said, in speaking to this exact experience, they were like, do you see that you're both learning the same lesson, but two sides of the same coin? Because you are beginning to learn that you are not below anyone else, and she is learning she's not above anyone else. And I'll just share as a side note that, like, literally a couple months after that happened, there were things she did. I felt like she got very outed with her community, that showed her a lot of her true colors that I saw the glimpse of in that experience. And again, she's very well respected, has a huge following. So whatever. And this is the thing, right? I just sat on this and I didn't dare like publicly call her out. And this is, sorry, I'm just kind of going into other territory
No.
now, but like in this was over a year ago that this happened, a year and a half. I've actually had dreams with her in it, with this exact theme of like fear of speaking out about her. I had a dream where it was like I was worried that she was going to somehow take me down in this industry because she is so much more established than me and I'm just like a new person coming in. And oh my God, if I speak truth to what happened or shared anything, then like she's going to take me out. Like she has a much bigger following. So it just shows the underlying fear
And
that exists.
it's a legitimate fear because it is, I mean, maybe not in your exact case, but we see this happening.
Yeah.
You see people speaking out for their beliefs that challenge the mainstream narrative, whatever the specific context may be. And we are seeing examples of people being like
Yeah.
muted,
Yeah.
fired,
Mhm.
dropped, because like you dare challenge the status quo, which insists that people of color stay oppressed.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, of course, it makes sense that like you have this fear, but
Yeah. And
your lesson has been like, no, like no more feeding that fear.
yeah, so I wrote off a lot of that. I convinced myself a lot of the time that I was taking the high road, and we talked about
Mm,
this. And in some respect, in a way, it's like whatever, same thing. We're not doing this for the purpose of calling this person out, right? We're not saying names here, but it is still important to at least speak on this. And this was the big message that kept coming through that actually sparked us to do this episode, because I have been sitting on these things for quite a long time, like almost 2 years, some of these things that have happened, and it's happened over and over again. The common thread is it's with white presenting women. um but I think what came through was like, you keep giving these people a pass. I'm giving them a pass by not speaking up about it. And I think it is a very important topic, especially in this industry. And I'm sure it translates to a lot of others too. But it's like, I've been giving these people a pass because almost every person this has happened with played a very important role. And I think it's very confusing for us. And Leah, I know you can speak to this too, but like, it's very confusing because I also think we're leaving behind that very binary, like black or white paradigm, right? Of like right and wrong, good or bad. We're just very much seeing that that's not the case. But all of these people played a really pivotal, important role. I really am deeply grateful and like respect them for it. But in a way, I was giving them a pass because of that. It's like, yeah, this happened, but also, oh, but they did play a really important, they were really helpful, like they really helped me through hard times. And so I'll just let it slide. And just the message that was coming through is like, you're giving them a free pass, and you're doing no one a favor by doing that. You're not doing either of you a favor, because by speaking on this, it's not so much calling out. And I don't know how I feel about this term. I kind of hate it, but for lack of a better phrase, like, it's about calling in calling them in some way and asking them, to me, it's about asking them to grow and step up, or like do some self-reflection. Like we all have been learning we need to do since 2020, right? There's no one that doesn't need to look at our own behavior and like reflect, right? We all have a lot to learn. I think we're all growing together. So they're like, by you speaking to this, it's an invitation. It's just an invitation to them of like, hey, maybe there is something to look at. And maybe it's somewhere that they could grow, or evolve. It, again, not excluding myself. I have stories around that too, like the mistakes
it
I've made.
it takes like a person. So if you were to raise, these issues with the person who is involved directly with you, we don't have that many examples of those kinds of conversations being super successful.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, I think especially American culture is so set up to be like, who's the best, who wins, who's, like it's
Yeah.
just, it is very black and white the way the culture is set up, right? So and like, and I think it is human nature also to be, for most of us, reactive in how defensive we are. Like if we're told that we made a mistake, it's like, oh, it's kind of,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work, I think, to get to a place where you're receptive to that. So I think it's so hard because you don't know how, you don't really have that many examples of how this conversation is super successful. And
Yeah.
so this whole giving a pass, yeah, I understand how you're saying. On the one hand, it's like, oh well, I'm taking the higher road because I'm just not going to say anything. I'm not going to like ruffle which also goes back to the Asian model
Yes.
minority myth.
Rock the boat.
Yeah, don't rock the boat. But also it's like, logically, what what else are we supposed to do? Like we talk to each other about being afraid to dive into certain conversations where that race and systemic racism is a big part of it, and instantly that like creates like a fighting ground feeling, right? Like
Yeah.
rather than like a communal, like, can we get on the same page? And to keep doing this, it's, yeah, I hear during like 2020 and the next couple years especially, I heard a lot from Black people saying, we're tired. Why you figure it out? Like, why are you coming asking me for what the solution is? Like, you created the problem, like,
Yeah.
and I never thought about it in those terms, but it makes total sense. Right? They're already like in a freaking lifelong brace position trying to stay
Yeah.
safe.
Like beyond exhausted.
Yeah, and then on top of it, some people will be called to or have the skills to outwardly have the conversations to try to get other people to see it.
Mhm.
But then to constantly have to prove your worth as a human.
Yeah.
Um, like, yeah, if I'm not going to speak for myself and my people, who will? But also, like, God, that's tiring. Is
Yeah.
so tiring to the point where I mean, we don't have to go into the Barbie movie because I don't think you've had a chance to
No,
watch it
but
yet.
I know I need to watch it. We should do
But
an episode on that.
yeah, but I mean, I still haven't really had many conversations about that with people because the overwhelming response to it was like celebration, right? Like, woohoo, like female written and directed blockbuster hit that's brought in more money than da da da, and like, yeah, female leading character that like weirdly has to poke fun of and really emasculate and dehumanize males in order to like raise their own humanity. That doesn't make sense. And like the blatant tokenism through the whole thing. Just like when I watched it, that's how I felt. And our aforementioned mutual friend who watched it and was really excited, and she was like, it was so like equitable and it was so great, and boo patriarchy, and like, what did you think of it? And I was like, so
Mm.
preemptively tired over, like not
Yeah.
wanting to have the conversation, to be like, oh my God, I have to explain to you like all the performative, like diversity things. And I was like, let me just wait till Ruby watches it. So like we could talk about it together, because I just, power in numbers, right? Like I just was like, oh man, I don't want to go there, because it does take so much energy to, and it shouldn't, but it does take bravery to take this on, because also like anytime, even just thinking about like affirmative action, right? And Asians have been quite a target of people who are opposed to affirmative action, because you and I went to UCLA and there were so many Asians, and I remember there was this like hum of like, you're only here because of affirmative action. And it was like, screw you. No, we like have really good grades and like really high test scores.
I work my
And
ass
we
off.
like do a lot of extracurriculars and volunteer work. Like, no, we're not only here
Yeah.
because of affirmative action. I think I read something once where it was like, without affirmative action, there'd probably be more Asians in like
Yeah,
certain
that actually is a thing with the whole, just around affirmative action. Like the Asians in there are very odd thing to contend with. Yeah, yeah. It's just
Yeah. But because the thing is, it makes people of color, groups of color, more visible,
mm,
where white supremacy, especially America, because it's founded on like all are welcome. I mean, obviously everybody in America is a today, not everybody, but the majority of us are immigrants. It was just a matter of like, when did our family immigrate? Like, was
yeah,
it in like the 14, 15, 16, 1700s, or was it like last generation? But we're all immigrants, right? That's like what America is founded on. So like people kind of pretty much have to say that they are accepting, but only if it doesn't
right,
disrupt their lives, it doesn't challenge them, and like they don't want us too visible,
right.
right? So
It's very conditional. It's like,
yeah.
sure, under these specific conditions,
Yeah,
you know.
and you mentioned this about like there's something about the invisibility, particularly of Asians. Do
Mm,
you remember like
yeah, yeah. We were talking about, yeah, I think yeah, it's just a very specific kind of pain, I think. And this has come up multiple times, I think, in our conversations. And I want to be clear every time it comes up, it's not about comparing. This is not about, again, it's not about like oppression Olympics and like who has it worse. It's not about that. It's just sort of an observation because it's something I've internally been working through on a deep level. It's just how things are maybe slightly different, right? Between different groups, like racial groups. So like, and I think because I'm married to a Black man, I obviously think of that often, right? Like how we're similar and how things might be a little different. Um, and I don't know, I've been the wound of sort of like invisibility and just not even being seen at all, literally as if you don't exist. To have your existence not even be like acknowledged, I think feels very kind of specific to Asian groups, probably especially in America where we were, again, just assimilate like um because it's, to me it's like, again, if you want to like think about it, maybe with, I feel like with African Americans and Black people, it's like it's been very people are very like out with it, right? And so it's one thing to be like outwardly obviously even hated, right, and targeted, which they are very targeted. And then then I feel like for Asian people, it's almost like this unspoken, thing where they do harbor that same hatred. But I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't think I'm articulating it well, but
well I
I think,
I
go
think
ahead.
like well there's something, because black, let's just use black people, black, a group, like as a group, as like a comparison to Asian people.
Yeah.
Um like Black people are very they have a very undeniable history in America, and they cannot hide at all their skin
Yeah.
color or where they come from. There's no, it's out there.
Yeah.
And they haven't been afforded like this model minority categorization that
Yeah.
Asians have. So there's this, which is obviously racism at its worst and is terrible. The thing that I have seen and always been envious of is the way the Black community has, and I mean, I'm only speaking in sweeping generalizations, but from my perspective, outsider perspective, like they look out for each other
Yeah.
in like a more fierce way, a more outspoken way, because they've had to, right?
Yeah.
Like they have to. And there's like little things I see, um, like just little like recognition of like
Yeah.
when a Black
Mhm.
person passes a Black person on the street, and maybe they are cousins, but maybe oftentimes I really do think they're strangers, but there's this sort of like, hey brother, or like kind of,
Yeah.
there's that like there's this like,
Camaraderie,
yeah,
acknowledgement.
and like I see you in this
Yeah.
space and I
Yeah.
got you. And
Yes.
I feel like Asians haven't had that because of the whole stay quiet,
Yeah.
and it's also built, regardless of American culture, it's built into a lot of Asian, just like what's expected of us. The hierarchy of like silence is built
Yeah.
into like family,
Yeah.
just like if you're a kid, you don't
Mm-hmm.
like challenge the grown-ups. Like
Yeah. It's a
in
very
Korean
cultural thing.
culture, yeah, Korean culture has a full-on way of speaking. There's
Yeah.
whole different, like there's a whole different like grammar level for when you're
Mm-hmm.
speaking to the elders,
Same with
and
Chinese
like,
people. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's, so that's one of the reasons why I get really nervous speaking Korean, because especially if I meet like a Korean, a Korean mom or something on the playground, but in here in New York, and I'm like, oh wait, do I speak casual because we're probably the
Right.
same age, or do I speak honorific because we're strangers? Like I don't know what the
I
cultural
know.
expectations are, but
And it
there's
could
a,
be so disrespectful when
yeah,
you
yeah,
like
and
mess
like I don't
up.
want to insult, but then I always land on, they know I'm American, so they're not going to take it personally, but I still feel, I have that
Yeah.
pressure on myself. But there's this like, going back to the invisibility thing, it's a function of keeping us invisible because it keeps us weaker. If we are not seen and we don't even see each other, we're not taught to look out for each other, like Black community. And again, like that comes out of a necessity to keep safety. But I think the lack of that is really what led to the years during the pandemic, with the massive rise in hate crimes against the Asian community. And it was only, it often takes like terrible things for people to be like, put down our own drama, our own wounds, or just be
Yeah.
like, wait, the thing that's happening out here is way bigger than
Mhm.
my fear. Like when I talk to you a lot about lately is like my fear of confrontation, just like, and to speak up. But it's like when you're treated like you are invisible,
Yeah.
then you're just like, what the point,
Attacked like that.
there's no point in me saying anything because you're not going to hear me because I'm invisible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I just think it's to me, it's like, it's such a specific pain to just not even exist in someone else's eyes. That's so, and I even spoke about like how I even feel like in Chinese culture, there's, how you can tell so much about a culture by the language, because different cultures have different words for things that maybe another culture doesn't even have, or it's like such a nuanced thing. And I was thinking about how, like, I know for Chinese people, there's a very specific word for like bitterness would be the closest translation. It's like bitter or bitterness, but just like that overwhelming feeling of like, it's just such a deep, like, to me, it's a result of such a deep like repression of everything, all of your feelings, because it's like at the end of the day, it's because we don't feel like it matters. It's like, why I'm not even going to say, I can't express this thing. I'm not even going to bother to say this or express it because it won't be heard. It won't be received. It won't be witnessed. It doesn't fucking matter. And that is like, so it kills me when I think about it. And I look at like all the dramas, like the Chinese, soap operas and dramas. It's all the same. It's like that same feeling of just like deep repressed bitterness, like such sadness. And I think it carries, like that I think is already rooted like in our culture. And then even if we're raised here, right? Or born here, it's from our immigrant parents and all that. So it's like we already have that. And then I feel like the environment here and what we had to do to further assimilate and further like deny ourselves and our culture just feeds into that, right? It like amplifies the wound that's already there. So I don't know. I had some really deep, heartbreaking like moments last year where I was just like, wow, that it just really sucks to feel like you don't even exist like to other people. I don't even matter enough for you to hate me outwardly. Do you know what I mean? Like that I think that's what
Yeah.
I'm at the root of. But at the end of the day, like all of it's weird, it's complicated because that's also an illusion. Because as we saw with COVID and the Asian hate crimes, like it does exist. We are hated. But it's almost like it's that thing maybe where it's like maybe it's because we're not seen as a threat that like people don't bother. People don't bother to like, but then when COVID happened, we were seen as a threat in a different way. And so it was instantly like, oh yeah, like you're
And
disposable too. We
when
don't care.
I think it was like the, again, going back to this idea of like the audacity of people to attack like Asian elderly,
Elders. Yeah.
in broad daylight,
Oh, heartbreaking.
right outside their homes, or even all kinds of Asian people just in like really public spaces, like on the subway. And I had a friend of mine who is like a young, fit male, and he was attacked twice. I mean, thankfully he's okay. Just
Yeah.
in Manhattan on just like broad daylight with lots of
Yeah.
people. And like it's like the audacity of the attacker
Mhm.
to, obviously that person is hateful and criminal and whatever, but they also knew like,
Yeah.
probably nobody's going to do anything if I attack this Asian person,
Yeah, that was a big thing too,
you
was
know?
seeing how much it just happened without people stepping in. Like
And I
that
think
was
there were
very,
so many. I have friends who were, they weren't attacked viciously, so they didn't file any police reports, but they
yeah.
were scared, they were threatened. I had there was like a mom friend at school who multiple times, for some reason, she's short, so I wonder if that's why she had this experience a few times. Like she looked more easy, more like more an easier target. But
Yeah.
like she like had her mask like ripped off her face more than once, just like walking down the street in
God.
New York City. And just like, and she's not going to report that, right? Like
Oh,
she's
but
not going to
that feels so like
of
violating and
of
obviously
course, but like,
scary.
what's she gonna do? Like call the New York
Yeah.
NYPD and be like, somebody just like try to take So my point is just like,
Yeah.
how many more of these hate crimes actually happened that weren't reported
Oh,
because it
yeah.
didn't result in someone's face getting slashed or someone dying, but
Or
like it is
acid
a
getting thrown
very,
on the face. Jesus.
yeah, I mean it's like real. And so like the whole invisibility thing, like yes, we are treated that way, but we know the hate is there because those last few years proved it.
Mhm.
And we know like racism exists because duh. um so it does no good for us to be silent, to not speak up. It is so uncomfortable though, because it goes against everything that we've been taught, everything that is in our DNA,
Yeah.
to just like not say stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and I think like that comes up a lot with, like there's that activist that we both follow now, YK Reborn, and they are I think they're Korean American. I'm pretty sure they're Korean American.
Mhm.
And their focus has been on like taking on anti-blackness within the Asian community. And I think it's coming up again with current events, like wondering why we're not hearing as much. And I think that gets into this thing of like, should we really be focused on policing the way people are voicing whatever their opinions are that's
Mm,
happening? It gets really complicated, and like we don't want to waste all our energy just like pointing fingers at other people. But like, I think there is a tie-in to other communities that are not speaking up, including taking it back to our, you know,
mhm,
our wellness or spiritual industry of like, all these people who are
mm.
all about
Yeah,
one love, peace everywhere,
that's we
light,
are one.
light and love. And yeah, and
Mhm,
um, just the hollowness of
mhm,
preaching these things when terrible things are happening in the world.
mhm,
Um, and you and I are not historians or politicians or, and, nor do we share any identity with anyone that is currently going through crisis. But we're able to like notice the silence within our community.
yeah, definitely.
And yeah, and we were talking about this right the other day, and it was like, okay,
Mhm,
it's not about policing how people are going to advocate for humanity. Okay, it's like we
yeah,
we are doing our best and messing up. I'm sure I'm messing up most of the time, but there's like such a hypocrisy
mhm,
in being like namaste. Okay, even just saying namaste, it's the anglicized understanding of it is the light in me
mhm,
sees, loves, salutes, respects the light in you, i.e., all of humanity.
mhm.
So, what about when humanity
Right,
is in crisis?
right. What, right.
Just like what is this whole thing of love and light? It feels like such BS, right? And you got some
Oh,
really interesting messaging about
yeah.
light coming
Mhm,
up during the darkest times, and
yeah.
how it's about finding light in darkness. And I remember my first thought was like, wait, but when something really bad is happening, like really dark is happening, where the
Mhm.
hell could there be light? And is that just spiritual bypassing? Is that just like love and light BS? And you explained it in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we so much to say around this whole topic, but the first thing I will say that I think is so important, because it came through the records as well, and it really enlightened me in some way where, it's hard because I always say now too, love and light is like the new thoughts and prayers, right? It's like it's hollow. It doesn't mean shit because when literal actual babies and children are being like murdered, you got nothing to say. Like your love and light ain't doing shit if you're not doing shit else. At the very least, speaking on it or acknowledging it's happening. So anyway, there's that. But um, so I received the message and I struggle, right? Just like you said, for these reasons. Like I struggle with that phrase often, but it's used all the time in the spiritual wellness community. Light, 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 light. And I think the message I got was like it's been misused and sort of not corrupted, but just misused. Where they were saying actually, when we say light, the definition of light is simply awareness. It's knowledge and awareness. It's like we mean it. They're like, we mean light in terms of bringing something to light. That's why when we say like looking for light in the darkness, darkness is when it's light is literally consciousness. Then, if you think about it, it's just bringing consciousness to something. So it's like when you're looking for something, especially when things are hard or bad, seemingly negative things are happening, it's often because there's some lack of awareness or consciousness about something. And then often through those experiences, it brings things to light that we maybe weren't aware of before. And if you look at that in the context of everything that has been unfolding, even collectively in the world, right? Especially since 2020, it is all about that. It's why they're so intricately connected. Like you can't even separate the two if you look at it that way. Because it brings the reason we're seeing so much of it, it's like bringing all these things to light that, by the way, we're always there. That's the irony, right, of everything unfolding. It's like we're realizing, shit, all this stuff has been happening forever, literally under our noses, and we were just like too blind, too like oblivious to even see it. But it brings like all these things to light, and so they're so intertwined, because in a way the experience of it can feel so dark. The experience of it is like, oh my God, this is fucking horrible. It's awful. And yet it's almost that thing, right, of like nothing's actually changed except our awareness.
Yeah.
And that is what they mean by light. It has just been misinterpreted and misused as like good vibes only.
Yeah, it's been bastardized, like
It's been yeah.
everything else within these practices that are appropriated and
Right.
watered down and
By
commodified and
white people, like it has to be said, right?
yeah.
That's what's happened to a lot of it when it gets bastardized and corrupted and misinterpreted, and like it's not good vibes only. It's far from that. It's not about staying positive all the time. It's not just about protecting your positive energy like through all of this. No, it's actually looking directly in the eyes of darkness to find some light. It's like, what am I learning from this? What am I gleaning about this?
Well, and
That
also
is,
like the concept just like basically of like, well, you can't have light without darkness and vice versa. Like they need each other
they don't
to
exist
exist.
without the
Yeah,
other.
yeah. Yeah. And so but yeah, I think it when you explained that, like, no, it doesn't mean light as in just everything is good, or it's like
Yeah.
it means literally like shining light on an area that is dark. Like, it is
Yes.
dark in this space, I'm going to shine a light on it
Hmm.
and become more aware of it, like understand it better, learn about it, or whatever it is. And um yeah, like that made so much sense, and my brain didn't automatically go there, because I have that like brainwashing of, well, when people say light or love and light and all that, like they're just trying to force positivity, toxic positivity on the situation. I think that is how, and so I immediately like reject it, because I
It does
think,
happen. Yeah.
yeah, most of what we see, or I don't know, I do think it is the leading sort of perspective within the industry, is one of like, oh no, like let's not talk about like what's like dark or negative or scary or sad, or like,
God forbid I disrupt my positive energy and my positive vibes, because that's how manifestation works, like all those things, right?
I mean,
So
I
I
think
call things to me.
this is the problem with like, okay, so obviously, like, I do not know everything about like ancient Eastern practices, but like if I can think about it in like a generalization, if we take mask wearing during the pandemic, and
Mhm.
how Asia was often used as like this case study of, hey, less disease spreads when people wear masks. Like, and
Yeah.
Asian people just pre-COVID would do that.
Yeah.
If they had
Yeah.
to go out and they had a cough, they wear a mask, or because of smog, they wear a mask to protect themselves and other. It was just like this basic kind of like looking at a person's decisions from like taking into account how they're going to impact society, and then trying to layer that, bring that into American individual focused society, totally didn't work. Right, like
Yeah.
people were
Yeah.
mad about like their rights when the CDC said that everyone had to wear masks, right? People were like, I refuse, like,
My
I
rights,
it's just like,
my
yeah, my
freedom, my
you're right, like we're trying to keep you safe too, like,
I
but this
know, because
whole,
it's like inconvenient or whatever, it's infringing on
it's
their
not even,
freedom.
it's just like, it's like it's just like everybody is brainwashed, I feel like. And so I think there's an American brainwashing of like the individual, right? It's all about individual success, rights, blah blah, everything.
Yeah.
And so you take something like a spiritual practice
Mm,
from the East, and
yeah.
which developed, I again, like, I can't speak to like all the deep history and everything through all the lineages, but like if you understand this like group mentality of Asian Eastern cultures.
Yeah.
And then the practices that would have come out of there probably also are born of that like group society benefiting mentality.
Yeah.
And then it arrives in the ultimate country of colonialism and
Right.
capitalism. I was listening to a podcast earlier today that referred to the biggest bully in the world, i.e. America. I was
Oh
like,
my
oh yeah,
God.
that's accurate, right?
Yeah.
So like these practices come here and they're like manipulated to
Right.
serve individual purposes. So to take a concept of namaste, which at its core is like saying we're the same.
Yeah.
We are human.
Yeah.
I see your humanity and I
Mhm.
love your humanity. That's what you're saying when you say namaste, right? Like, but you take that and serve yourself with it. Oh, it's my me time. It's my
Right.
self-care. It's
Right.
my good vibes. It's
Right.
my like social media break because my mental health. It's my um and like it's confusing because yes, everybody should take care of themselves. It is important. But it's like you took that idea and you're really running with it to the point where it's just about the individual.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just about and that's why people came at Selena Gomez so hard, right? Because she's got what 430 million followers. She has the ability to really make an impact with whatever she says. And I mean, who knows? There sounds like there's a lot of forces that are controlling her, but like when she came and was like, oh, I'm sad, so I can't say anything, I'm leaving. Like, yeah, no
Right.
shit, you should be sad right now. Like, this is like whatever
Yeah.
quote side you're on, we should all be sad for the
Yeah.
state of humanity, right? Like, that is a
Mhm.
normal response. That is not like a, oh no, I'm sad, I need to go and um do all these practices to not be sad. Like,
Yeah.
what? No, like
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the difference in everything you're saying is like the difference is people starting to put my wellness, my happiness, my well-being, it's above yours or above everyone else's. I think that's a difference, right? A core difference of the whole individualistic culture is like, well, mine just matters more than yours. It's more valuable than yours. So I'm going to do what's best for me. And then yeah, the whole Selena thing. I mean, I think yes, it read as a complete cop out because it's like you basically use your influence on everything else. You've basically acknowledged how influential of a figure you are in everything you created. That's why you created it, because you know that you can make a difference. And then to come here and say, and then suddenly be like, well, one post that I made, I know that nothing I do is going to make a difference, is like essentially what
right.
her post is saying. I'm sorry that my one post or my words just aren't going to matter. It's not going to make any difference. Like, of course it's just seems like a complete cop out.
I think this is what we see through the wellness industry is this like
Yeah.
it's again the hypocrisy. It's the like because I don't know too much of her music, but I have liked when she's taken a stand for her mental health and when she's taken a stand for
Yeah.
her the criticism that she's gotten for being in the public eye, and like people have no business criticizing the size of her body or whatever she
Yeah.
looks like or whatever her personal life decisions are. Like, I've always felt like, yeah, she has a right to stand up for herself.
Yeah.
And I really thought she was brave for speaking to that. But when it gets uncomfortable, inconvenient, when there's no direct benefit to you to say
Yeah,
this,
exactly.
is when you're like, no. And that's what I feel like is happening throughout the wellness
Oh,
world, which is
100%. Yeah.
like, wait. You're all about like love and spreading positivity and like look and humanity and namaste and
Right.
like connection to
When it makes
nature.
when it makes you money,
Right.
you know? I mean, and I feel like it's the perfect time to mention, I don't know if we want to do it by, well, we should do it by name probably. I don't know how to pronounce actually her video, but there was that, the woman that we follow on
Naily by
Instagram.
nature. Naily by
Yeah, is it
nature.
Nayli?
Naily by
Nayli?
nature. I
Oh,
think.
Nayli.
I don't.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
how to pronounce Nayli. Okay, Nayli by nature, yes. But her video just, it spoke so deeply to me because she basically called out, she was like, the reason the spiritual and wellness community is so silent right now, especially the white wellness community is so silent, is because they thought that the great awakening of humanity. Oh, I'm frozen. Hold on.
I can hear you though. It's okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
can still hear you.
But they thought the great awakening of humanity would center them as essentially the white saviors. It's like I thought I was going to be the one. We were going to be the ones to come in and spread our light and just enlighten everybody because I'm as the guru, as the leader. And hearing that was like, oh my God, like, yes, 1,000% yes. That is at the center of why so many are silent and uncomfortable and frankly, probably annoyed. They're just like, ugh, just like, I want this thing to pass already so I can get back to like being the white, being the savior that I am or being the guru again. And it's like, I don't think we're going back.
See, I don't even really follow people in that industry anymore because of my like exodus from it, like a few
Mhm.
years ago when I was just like, oh, I can't, I feel like I'm suffocating in this world. And um I don't even really know what they're saying, but when I saw that video, I was like, that tracks. Like I'm sure that
That's
may,
totally it.
yeah. And
Because it's the light worker thing. I mean, I have to say it because that term light worker has been so widely used in the community. And it's essentially the concept of a light worker is like, oh, we are one of the souls that came here at this time. And I get it. And it's like, it's a hard thing. It's so not black and white, right? Like I'm sure even you and I have had
you
conversations
don't
where
want
we
to pull
at some
out a
point,
pendulum to see if they're telling you the truth. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me see. Your light worker? No, my pendulum says no.
yeah. But it's like there's some level of it or pieces of it that do resonate. I'm not completely bashing that thing, right? It's like, okay, I do feel like part of my purpose is whatever to do this particular work in the world. But it's easy to spin that and make it so self-important, right? And this message has also come through many times of like, okay, like people who identify as light workers, like we are the souls who came here to basically save humanity. It's like it could be spun that way and become so self-important that way. Where maybe it's more like, oh, part of my purpose in this lifetime is like to do healing work, to help people heal, which by the way, there have been healers on the planet forever, but it can easily spin. I feel like the white wellness world so easily spins it into
I
I'm here
think
to save the world.
I
And like,
think because it goes to the filter of American values, which is
yeah,
rooted in capitalism, right? Like it's rooted in stealing, whether
yeah,
it's like practices or land or food. Like
everything,
I've talked
everything.
about this a lot, like, but with kimchi in particular,
Yeah,
it's so baffling to me because I spent my entire childhood being made fun of when people came over and smelled kimchi in my house because kimchi is my mom used to make it from scratch and then your house just smells like that forever. Even if it's in the refrigerator, you open it, it's like,
yeah,
and then those people now are like superfood,
I
fermented cabbage,
know.
yay. And like it's difficult because that person who is now like obsessed with kimchi maybe never made fun, that individual never made fun of
Yeah,
me or another Korean person
right.
back in the day. But it's just like there hasn't, I think like what feels icky, to use your word from before, is like there's been no real like deep repair or acknowledgement or it just being like it just continually getting shoved into invisibility and
Yeah,
silence, and we see now the huge issues that causes to allow that to happen and to just be like, oh, I'm uncomfortable talking about it, or oh, I don't know how to talk about it, or like, and we have to like start somewhere. And I think that's why you've been sitting on a lot of your thoughts for like over a year or whatever, is because even though you want to, it's like, how do I even, and
Yeah.
how do I make it? You're also, I think I do this, but like preemptively worrying about like with, oh, and I was going to say about the affirmative action, when it was like reverse racism, that was like, do you
Oh,
remember like the you're
yes.
accused of reverse racism if you like
Yeah.
if you talk about it, and you're like,
Oh my
no,
God. That's so
what?
con
No.
That's bullshit.
But
That's bullshit. Yeah.
it's the gaslighting, right?
Oh
Like
God, yes.
it's
The
the constant
gaslighting.
gaslighting of like, and
Oh,
I even, like
yeah.
so my husband is white, and we have over the years, I'm sure the conversations you and your husband have, we've had like the opposite, because you have like an inherent
Mm.
understanding when you speak, which is why he's able to be like, oh yeah, that sounds like,
Big girl shit.
right. And and it's the opposite with my husband, because he he doesn't move through the world with those experiences. And also, he is not racist in the way of like, we're all racist. I feel like I've taken to saying that we're all racist because we all see color. You can't not, but
To a
he's not
degree, yeah.
obvious. He's not like actively white supremacist in any way, you know? So,
Yeah.
so instantly, when I try to talk about something where it paints white people as a whole in a bad light, he feels like,
Yeah.
wait. You're, like he's made comments before of like, well, not all. Oh no, actually, when I said something about, I can't even remember, but something positive about a white person, he'll be like, see, we're not all bad or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I know you're not all bad.
Feeling,
Like I
yeah.
may, like obviously, but those conversations are just so difficult because like we're all, not only are we trying to find our voices to explain deep
Yeah.
wounds, fears, anger, but like
Hmm.
we're also trying to like offset like
Yeah.
hurting your feelings or
Oh my
being
gosh.
reverse racist or, and I think
Yeah.
like the gaslighting is part of keeping it
Mhm.
all quiet, to
Oh,
not disturb and disrupt the system.
yes, 1,000%. And yes, I know we wanted to like speak to the gaslighting because I think, and this is why it is such a complicated topic. Like, obviously, even with everything we're going through right now, right, with Israel and Palestine and all these things, and it keeps coming up, right, of like, oh, the silence is deafening from certain groups of people. And we talked about this earlier. It's like there's a reason why certain groups of people are expected to speak up in these times, right? If you say that you're about this or your life's work is about this, like you should be saying something. So again, I mean, this is why in the spirituality wellness world, like I guess it's been complicated. And part of the reason I sit on it is like, yes, number one, we don't necessarily always need to be policing how everybody is showing up or not, or what they're saying. Two, there's the whole thing. And I feel like this is a complicated topic because I think it gets turned around and used against us often, is the whole like the divisiveness thing, the playing into the division. And so I've been sitting with this a lot because it's interesting because this is a topic I've spoken on a lot because it has come through so strongly. And I know that it is a huge part of our like collective lesson as human beings right now, is the whole not seeing everything as binary, the whole polarization thing that just like causes further division. But I feel like that's now sometimes being used as an excuse now to like not say anything because I don't want to play into the divisiveness,
Mm.
right? And I guess my sort of response to that is you don't have to pick a side. I don't feel like I had to pick a side or something to say something, just to even acknowledge that this shit is happening and it's not okay, and we got to like figure something out. We got to work together to figure out another way. Like that's not picking a side, you know?
Mm.
Like there's a way to do that And so that's another way, like speaking to the whole thing about like giving people free passes. Like I've been sitting with this because again, a lot of white presenting wellness, like spirituality coaches and mentors that I've personally worked with, who I deeply respect, who have been like so helpful for me and amazing mentors. Like I've been, just observing in these times how they've been responding. And most of the time it's to not even acknowledge, it's not responding. It's silence, right? It's not acknowledging. And I guess as a person of color or as somebody who has been oppressed in any way, to see that it just is a further form of gaslighting because of the long history of the fact that we have lived forever with people telling us like what we are feeling isn't even real. It's like it's not valid. Oh, it's not as bad as you say it is because I don't see it. We hear that all the time, constantly. And it's again, it's like another way to silence us, right? Like, or to make us think we're crazy, which is what gaslighting is. And so I can't help but take it or interpret it as any other way than like it's just another form of gaslighting when you can't even acknowledge that this shit is happening. Like you don't even see it. And that even touches on the invisibility thing, right? And that's maybe a more personal wound as an Asian person, as we've been talking about. It's just another way we feel invisible. And this is also why I think people of color so identify with the plight of everything happening with Palestinians right now. And I know we don't want to fully go into this, or that wasn't the purpose of this, but like you can't help but see and feel the similarities and the parallels here, and I was going to say it earlier, but like it's also hard not to notice that a lot of these celebrities or people that are coming under fire, so many of them are white presenting. Like I can't help but notice that. And it's like, well, I'm just looking at kind of facts here in that sense,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, yeah. Anyway.
So then how do we, as just mere mortals, not not celebrities with 430 million followers,
Right.
but people who do feel a deep connection to our humanity, which includes our spirituality.
Yeah.
And, for you, especially doing the direct work that you do, trying to support people in this way, how do we how do we make sure to, in our like small day-to-day actions, just do live in like the most, I don't even know what the word is, like just in the way that like our most ideal principles of what we believe in, like how do
Yeah. Like
we,
honoring that.
yeah, how do we honor that, and how do we make sure that we're not also because like I think when we have been asleep in,
Mm-hmm.
in the dark or quiet, and denying what we are feeling, like
Yeah.
unconscious about it, in doing that we were unknowingly
Mhm.
perpetuating,
Yeah.
right?
Which is why
So
I got that message of like, you can't just keep giving free
right,
passes. It's not helping anyone.
right. So how do we, like, I don't want to do that, right? Like, so if when I look back at like leaving teaching yoga,
Mhm.
and it was complicated for many reasons, but a big reason was like, I don't want to add to this like problematic industry.
Yeah.
But can we, as people who are like trying to preserve the sanctity of these practices and to not make it all about our individual ascension or whatever,
Yeah.
can we still be a part of it without like perpetuating all the BS?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question that I don't think there's a simple answer to, but all I can say is like, that's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's almost like you just got to try. And I think at this point, like, it's hard and it's very uncomfortable. I think taking this road and trying to honor the integrity, right, of our values and doing it in a way that actually honors that and feels good is hard and uncomfortable because there's no blueprint. Like I say this all the time, and I've had this conversation with many people, like Kim, Saira, and my friends in the space, especially people of color, like who are healing practitioners in this space and stuff. We have these conversations often because we're all trying to find how to do that. Like, how do we still stay in the space in a way that feels an integrity with all of that? And I don't think there's a simple answer. We don't have a roadmap. It'd be nice if we did, but it requires, I think an important thing to remember is it's going to require making mistakes. And I say this often, like there has to be room for mistakes because perfectionism is just another way to impede progress, right? It's just another thing that prevents us from making any progress or improving on anything if we can't even try because we're so afraid that it's not going to be perfect. Of course, it's not going to be perfect. And this is like a really hard thing to contend with, especially if you're like a perfectionist person, all these reasons you said, like I don't do well with confrontation. I don't like being confrontational either. I'm a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist, like all these reasons. But then you realize like they're just all ways to prevent us from growing, from making any progress. And I actually felt like it was important to share this earlier. And I feel like it's maybe a good time to bring it up now because I share it often. And I just think it's important. Like this road is very humbling. you know it's the willingness to be uncomfortable and look at ourselves first. Mostly we should mostly be looking at ourselves here rather than like pointing at everybody else, which is what people do, right? But it's like, where can I be better? Where am I missing things? What am I not seeing? And I share this often that like this was years ago. This was like pre-2020. I feel like maybe it was like 2018 or something. But when Black Lives Matter started, and I shared this post too, and I think it was maybe one of the first ones that I remember you commented on it and we kind of connected over this as well. But Black Lives Matter was starting. And as an Asian person married to a Black man with biracial children, I didn't think about it honestly. And I posted something on Facebook or something, and I ended it with all lives matter. Even though like my point was like, I actually was supporting, I think the mission, what Black Lives Matter is about, but I ended it by saying all lives matter. And I didn't give it much thought. I just like, that's what came out first. And then later on, it's like, as I learned more, as more was coming to light, if you will, I was like, holy shit. I realized how problematic that was. I just didn't see that before. I wasn't aware of it. And this is like what all this work is about. This is what we're doing, right? And I was like, oh my God, I see how crazy problematic that is. I felt horrible. And I obviously cringed. Like that was one huge cringe moment that I was like, oh my God, I need to go back. My first impulse was like, I need to go back and delete that shit. Like no one can see that. God forbid. I don't even know what my husband's family was thinking when they saw that or something, all these things. But then I just had this moment and it was really scary. I remember my heart was pounding. I was so nervous, but something in me was like, you have to speak on this. Like rather than delete it, you need to speak on this. And I just shared that. I was like, look, I'm a person of color. I'm married. My own family is Black and I made this mistake. Like I didn't see. And it's just like, I just didn't know better before. I just didn't know. I wasn't aware. But it just shows that like all of us can be like this oblivious to things. We all have blind spots. Which is why, by the way, I could never buy that. It's like, this is why when I look at like a white person who feels like they have no work to do, I'm just like, I roll my eyes because there's no way, we all have a ton of work to do in this space. So I just think first and foremost, it's the willingness. It's the willingness to like be uncomfortable. It's the willingness to be humbled and to make all the mistakes. And the last thing I wanted to share is like that whole experience with that woman that I shared about earlier, who was like my mentor. I ended up being grateful for it in the sense that actually it was from that experience that my mission was born for my brand, my business. It wasn't that before. It always was like a value of mine, but it forced me to put a huge stake in the ground. And I was really afraid to do it. It took me a while to like commit to that as a mission. I was like, am I going to say I'm about this? Because I gotta really be about it then. And by the way, I don't know what the fuck that looks like because I don't
Mm.
really have any examples. All I see in this whitewashed wellness space is all the shit that I have issues with. And I don't know what I'm doing. I just had to admit, I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And it was really scary to like put that stake in the ground. But all I can say is like, I'm trying, I care and I'm trying. And that's all that matters. It's like, do you give a shit? And are you just trying? And some days our effort, our trying doesn't look perfect. I'll admit it too. There's a time when I was like resisting feeling my emotions to all these things. I was resisting like digging into the research, but at some point I know I'll do it. It's like I'm trying my best. That's all we can say.
I think also your mission statement, the way I feel like I saw a preliminary version of it and then it evolved, like you kind of cemented it a bit after that. And I haven't seen anything like that, that's so unabashedly centering BIPOC and the reclamation of like ancient spiritual practices, tying it back to where they actually came from, and just like the logistical things of making it more affordable for people of BIPOC identities. And um yeah, there is no blueprint. That's new. Like that's very, it's like it's wonderful. And I think also the way you lead with joy, and I've always said this about you, like joy and um laughter, not in like a oh, let me just pull the silver lining out of everything, but I think first and foremost the laughter at like to your own self, right? And the ability to be humble about yourself and to um not be so attached to coming off like a certain perfect way. And like it was, you got to see it at your first event a couple weeks ago, right? You got to see it live, like your mission statement come to life in like its first sort of public real life moment. And um I guess that is the way we keep moving forward with acts like that, and
Yeah.
efforts like that.
Yeah. And I just think it's like all we can say is like the willingness to keep trying, right? To keep going. It's like we can't just give up and give in to like, well, that's the way it is. And
You can't
you
you
know,
can't keep giving passes. You can't.
right, giving passes. And also we can't just keep giving up the things that are important to us, like walk and this is obviously no criticism at all. Like I know that especially for you walking away from like the yoga stuff there were many factors too. And who knows, maybe you'll find your way more back to it at some point. But it's like, yeah, we can't just like, it's like, why should we just give up and like walk away from those things?
Mm.
And I think looking back, reflecting on this whole journey now, I think that's the consistent message I've kept getting and why I keep getting the hits to keep going and like keep speaking up and just keep trying. You just got to try. Because they're like, this is too sacred. This is too important for you to give up. In a way, it'd be like giving up your soul, you know? And like in
Totally.
that sense, then it's won. The oppression has won. The white supremacy has won. And joy to me is a big piece of that. That's why I lead with it. It's like I always say our joy is our resistance. Because if when we let people, whoever the forces like take that from us, it's like, it's just taking parts of our humanity, all those things, our joy, our ability to care. We have to just
Yeah.
keep caring.
Yeah. I do think about I didn't do yoga for myself for a while, I think it was like it was like a bad breakup kind of
Mhm.
thing. And then as I started to like go get back on the mat and would have those like deep connective practices that initially made me fall in love with it. It was so sad, because it's like, oh, this is what has been meaningful to me, and this is what I genuinely was trying to bring to people through my work. And
And I'm
it,
sure you did, by the way. You did
I
bring that
mean, I,
a
yeah,
lot
I
to the
think,
table.
I think so. Like that direct, like person to person connection was real. And, but yeah, there was a part of me that was I got beaten down by, I was just like, fine, you push me out. Like I'm tired of like, and it was not just race for me. It was also like being a mom in that world was just really, it didn't fit like at least the way my life had been set up. Not, of course, there are plenty of mothers and parents that are yoga teachers, but it just didn't like fit with what I was doing. But I do feel like and it's still in repair. Like I will say that I'm still getting reacquainted with my practice, but like
Yeah.
I know that the magic of that is real and it's still there, and
Yeah.
even just like actually when I started teaching and had to, I found myself just negotiating my class rate or whatever with like a studio I taught, I was like, oh man, it's taking something pure and I'm having to like put a capitalistic like taste onto
No.
it. There's
Yeah.
that already. But
Ever struggle.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, it's like we have to keep staying, I guess, like present, even though that's such an overused word, but with what like what we are feeling intuitively, what we care
Yeah.
about, what brings us joy, um what is important to us, and just keep trying to speak to that, I think. And
Yeah.
I think the more I did a podcast recording yesterday with somebody who um had never really had any conversations about her Asian identity outside of just like her partner and like close friends, maybe. She'd never
Mhm.
taken it to any sort of more public facing platform. And she was very like afterward, we had a really wonderful conversation, but afterwards she was a bit like, oh, I'm still trying to figure out how to express myself when it comes to this, and yeah, I totally get it. I think our voice notes to each other help. Like when
Oh yeah.
when you're saying things like a lot, and I say this to you a lot, right? I'm like, I know you know this already. I'm just like practicing articulating it.
I
So
know.
in that same way, like I hope and think that the more we have these kinds of conversations, the
Yeah.
more we can call in our
Mhm.
industry. Because that's the only way forward too. Because I think we have the frustration and the anger is real on our
Yeah.
end. Um, but if it just leads to finger pointing and more divisiveness, like nothing is going to actually evolve, nothing is going to get better. We're just going to be pushed on opposite sides.
Yeah.
And that's like not the answer either. But if we don't talk about it, like that, like it's just gonna stay or
Yeah.
stay as bad as it is or worsen. So yeah, I hope people receive conversations like ours with like many grains of salt, that like we are speaking from our personal experiences and sharing our personal feelings, but very open to calling people from all different identities in if they want to have the dialogue, because like it's not also like again, going back to my husband just for a moment, I'm not like, oh, I hate all white people.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not
I
that at
know.
all. Like I'm married to you and I love you and I
And
love
your children are half like, come
right,
on.
right. Right. So we need to stop making, when you call out like a
Right.
systemic issue, whether it's
Mhm.
in our country or in a specific industry,
Yeah.
it's not like you are bad and you go over there, we kick you out from being bad. Like no,
Yeah.
like what we're emphasizing is our shared humanity, and like the
Yeah.
first step from that has to be talking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree that we're more and more and more realizing that so many of the things we're talking about that are problematic are the systems and the structures, not necessarily like individual people. Like, yes, I know they get called out, but it's like those things are all a product of. The point is we are all a product of. And so again, going back to like everyone having blind spots and all those things, it's like it's because we're a product of these systems, and just acknowledging that like we've been swimming in the water forever. You're not going to see the water yet, until, okay, I'm frozen again, but until it's like brought to light. So it's just, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think just the willingness to look at these things and have the conversations to deeper understand, um, is just what it will take.
The
So
the water analogy is really good. I think I've shared this with you before. Again, from my one of my yoga teachers, Eric Schiffman, where he says we're all little waves in the same ocean,
mm,
thinking we're separate individual waves, but we're actually all the ocean. It's like
yeah,
it's like
it's exactly that.
you're a little wave over here thinking you're different from that little wave over there, but you're all the same ocean, you're all in the same
Yeah,
water. Um
exactly.
but to be able to talk about that without the whole like love and light bypassing, right? It's so hard.
Yeah, it's
But,
just like, I mean, it's even when you say that concept alone, I feel like it's self-explanatory because it means someone else's pain
mm,
is felt, like you should feel that,
mm,
you know, for all the
yeah,
ocean.
yeah.
So,
Thank you
thank,
so much for having this conversation. Um,
I'm so grateful just for the opportunity, like for you giving me the safe space because, as I shared with you before we hit record, like I was nervous about this conversation for all the reasons we talked about. But I knew it needed to happen. And I feel like this is the perfect way to have that like safe, open conversation. So thank you.
thank you, Ruby.
Arctic.
Yeah, it's good. And I'm sure we'll move back into our private voice notes to further dissect everything we talked about. But
That's what we like to do. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Love you.
Love you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.